Business Computing Weekly, session number 438. Hey folks, today's podcast is sponsored by Frugal Brothers. Go to frugalbrothers.com to download free 30-day demos of GFI Network security products.
You are listening to the Business Computing Weekly podcast. It is time to incorporate technology into your business and take it to the next level. And here's your host, Bruce Naylor.
Hey, and welcome to Business Computing Weekly, the podcast that helps you grow with power, passion, and performance. We have a great guest on for you this week, Mr. Tom Merritt. He is a top tech journalist. Started his career in country music radio in Illinois, and today he is a highly respected technology journalist. Worked for ZDNet, I think Cnet. He's been on TWiT, a host of shows on TWiT. He's a writer, blogger, podcaster, produces web television. He is in the new media space big time, but he's also an entrepreneur, and he's going to share with us his story, that journey that he took from the very beginning of a small country music station in Illinois to what he's doing today. I think it's a fascinating story, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I do. A few things I want to share with you. First off, the complete show notes can be found at frugalbrothers.com/438. So there you go. You can find it there. One thing I wanted to share with you is that I am reaching my storage limit with Podomatic on my prior episodes. I didn't know much about podcasting before I launched a podcast. In fact, I looked for a very quick and easy way to set up a podcast and get it out there. And what I did is I took the audio of our YouTube show, Business Computing Weekly, and turned it into a podcast. And I found a service, Podomatic, and started using that. And it's been a really good service. No complaints with Podomatic. But what I've learned is over time, especially when you have a lot of episodes, is you get a number of people downloading the old stuff. Well, I have a storage limit of 2 gigabytes of my show. Now I record ultimately in an MP3 file, and I record at a rate of 64 kilobits mono for this show. And that creates the smallest possible file size with the best possible audio quality that we have. You wouldn't want to use that if you have a lot of music and stuff like that. But I try to get to the smallest file size that still sounds halfway decent for our listeners. But even so, when you've got 100 episodes on there, you reach that 2 gigabyte limit fairly quickly, quicker than I anticipated. And the question is, how do I fix it? Well, I've got a couple things that I'm trying to do. Number one, I'm going to have to actually move the physical files from Podomatic to somewhere else that offers the ability to have unlimited archives. That way I won't have to worry about deleting shows, because the way it happens now, when you hit that 2 gigabyte wall, you got two options. One, you can take out a 2.5 gigabyte plan. I think that's the top one. That buys you a little bit more time, but not a lot. Or secondly, you have to go back and start deleting old episodes. And I don't like that idea, because I have old episodes downloaded all the time. Hundreds a month are downloaded. So that's not a solution. So I'm looking at relocating the physical media files to Libsyn. That's probably where we're going to go. And in order to do that, hopefully we can arrange it to where Libsyn will redirect the media files. When people see the links and so forth, they'll redirect it, or Podomatic will redirect it to Libsyn so people can download it there. The media that actually be hosted on Libsyn. If this is not possible, the worst case scenario is going to be that I have to create a new feed, a new podcast feed in iTunes and other directories with everything set up for Podomatic, which would mean there would be 2 Business Computing Weeklies for a while in iTunes. Slight variation in the name in order for that to work. That would be a worst case scenario, and this is something we would do over several months and not just all at once. But we may find ourselves asking you to, resubscribe to the new Business Computing Weekly, and which would be the final home of Business Computing Weekly down the road. And I will let you know how that goes over time. I will let you know. So we're not going to just one day just suddenly quit updating the podcast. But if that comes to pass, we will give you plenty of notice, and we will post an episode. This is, now is the time to make that move. So I just thought I would give everybody a heads up. Also be incorporating new cover art as well. So we'll have the cover art. We're going to be making these changes. We're going to be doing it over several months. So just wanted to give everybody a heads up on that. The second thing that I wanted to talk about just briefly is back on episode number 431, I spoke with Misty Young, the restaurant lady. She's an author of a book, and she talks about her 5 irrefutable laws of restaurant success, but it's actually it's the 5 irrefutable laws of small business success, and I decided I was going to apply those to my small business. You know what I do, folks. I sell software, particularly network security software. That's how we make our living here. And it's so easy to get caught up in the day-to-day stuff that goes on, right? Just all the little things, dealing with customers, doing the accounting, taking care of taxes, all that stuff, delivering product. It's so easy to get caught up in this that sometimes you forget these 5 irrefutable laws. I want you to think of the laws as kind of a hub and spoke system. So the hub is your customer. Everything is centered around your customer. Everything. But they kind of have an order to them. And the laws are, just in this order, the law of leadership, the law of operations, the law of financials, the law of products, services, and the law of marketing. So the law of leadership is your ability to influence. Because, right, that's our job. If with being a business owner is to influence customers, influence all kinds of people that we need to have, vendors, etc., our employees, to get things done. What's the law of operations? Well, the law of operations touches on every aspect of your business. Every aspect that you can needs to be systematized, to be efficient, to be effective, to meet your goals. And that's done through policy, it's done through procedure, it's done through measured performance. Let's talk about the law of operations. That is the law of operations. I'm sorry. The law of financials. I got ahead of myself there. The law of financials. That's where you have to have a lot of integrity, a lot of due diligence. You've got to track everything. What is the lifeblood of a business? Cash flow. And it's surprising the number of small business owners who don't have a good handle on their cash flow. They may know what's in the checking account, they may know what's in the till, but they don't really know what their net worth is. They don't have a good handle on their accounts receivable, their accounts payable. You need to have a handle on that. The law of products and services. A lot of people think that would be first. Well, my product should be first. Not necessarily. We need to assume that our products are reliable, okay? And that we diligently serve our customers and associates with the courtesy, appreciation, respect, and kindness. That is the law of products and services. They need to be reliable. Everything needs to be where customers expect the quality. They get it. Everything works like clockwork. And finally, the law of marketing. The business must use multimedia tools to communicate timely with customers and associates in relevant and meaningful ways. These are the 5 laws. These are the laws that I am employing today at my small business, and it's not easy when you sit down and actually start doing this stuff. When you actually sit down and start writing job descriptions, it's not easy. Not easy at all. When you start actually giving people goals and here's how we're going to measure your performance, and believe me, it's not easy. Getting a good grip on financials isn't easy. Your ability to influence others doesn't come easy. Products and services you should already have down pat, but are you actually making sure that the service that you provide your customers is reliable, that everybody is treated the same, fairly, and well? Each and every time by everybody in your business? It's a good question to ask. And the marketing is also a tough one. Multimedia tools, using social media, using blogging, using podcasts, using maybe you're in a business that you do need print. Maybe you need newspaper. Maybe you need radio. I don't know. But it needs to be part of an overall multimedia campaign. These are the things that I'm working on. And I'm going to share my journey with you this year through all these things as we implement them in our business. So it's time to bring Tom on. But before we do, just want to give this brief message from our sponsor. What if I told you that you can manage your IT from one unified platform? It's called GFI Cloud, Well, with GFI Cloud, you can streamline your in-house IT management, simplify network operations and security with integrated antivirus, asset tracking, and network monitoring and remote control. Save time and reduce cost from a single dashboard. Free up your IT resources so they can focus on other high-priority tasks. Keep your network safe and manage antivirus on computers on and off the network. And get visibility into the status of your workstations and servers to keep your network running at peak performance. You can always know that you have detailed hardware and software information right at your fingertips, and you can manage your network remotely with our web-based console. And the best part is prices start as low as $1 per month per computer. For a free 30-day demo, go to gfi.com/frugal. That's FRUGAL cloud. Again, go to gfi.com/frugal cloud. Joining us today is Mr. Tom Merritt. And Tom, we're glad to have you on the show today. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Bruce. Thanks for having me on.
Tom, you've had a very interesting career. You've been in radio. You are an author. You are a blogger, a podcaster. You've done web television. You're just prolific in the technology world. And I would like you to share with us your story, how you started from those days back in Illinois, the country music station, to where you're at today.
Sure. Prolific is one way. Tries a lot of stuff to see if it sticks is another way of putting it. But yeah, no, the short version is when I was in high school, my mom was an aerobics instructor, and she was instructing the secretary/wife of the general manager of the radio station that had just opened up. It was 1986. Maybe it was 1985, WGEL, the best country in the country. And so I was looking for a job. I was 16 years old. And I thought, well, wouldn't it be cool if I didn't have to work at McDonald's? I could go work at a radio station. And she talked to Ellie and got me a gig there. I would go in on Saturdays, and really they were looking for somebody to pay minimum wage to sit there and flip the records for American Country Countdown, which is what I did. But after a while, I was able to do some evening works after school. So I had a little 6 to 8 shift playing records, and then they had it was a weird station at 8 o'clock at night. They would change over to heavy metal music. So I started doing the Saturday nights because none of the other guys wanted to work Saturday night. So I'd start doing the heavy metal stuff from 8 to midnight. In fact, I would go 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock playing country music, and then at 8 o'clock start playing heavy metal. It's kind of funny.
I'm trying to get my mind wrapped around going from country to heavy metal in one station.
It was when the station had first been put on the air by the original owner. He had put adult contemporary on in the morning. And then I think he went to gospel in the middle of the day, and then country, and then rock at night. So it was all over the map just to see what worked. And it seemed like country was the favorite, but the rock stuff got a lot of audience too. So they just stuck with those two for a while. Eventually they dropped the rock and they just went all country, and that's what they are now. But I got really into radio. I got very excited about doing radio. So when I went to college at the University of Illinois, I started working at WPGU, which is this weird independent / college station. They are not owned by the university, but they are student run. And that has changed a little bit over the years. When I was there, there were two non-student positions, the general manager and the head of sales. And then over the years, I guess the sales staff became more permanent, et cetera, et cetera. But I was program director there for a couple of years. And then I went off to grad school at the University of Texas at Austin. I did a ton of things in Austin. I worked at a bookstore, Half Price Books, through most of it. But I also did some pirate radio, and I worked in theater and wrote a play and put it on. And I did a website. It was my own website. It's still on the internet. It was a parody news site. And it was something that I had come up with before I ever saw The Onion. So I was really mad when I finally ran into them and realized they were doing it a lot better than I ever could. But I kept at it, and I met people on the internet. This was in 1996, 97. And so I created a staff of people who would submit articles, and I would edit them. And we worked on a schedule. We had a weekly publication schedule. And around about 1999, I was talking with a friend of mine about, I just don't know what I want to do, where I want to go, whether Austin is still a place for me. And she was out in San Francisco and said, look, there's jobs falling from trees out here, because it was the dotcom boom at the time. So she started sending me job descriptions. These job descriptions were actually jobs she got off of the San Francisco Women on the Web list.
Okay.
So I owe a debt to her sneaking them to me. But I went out to San Francisco in August of 99, had 3 interviews, got 3 job offers. And one of the jobs was working for Surf Monkey. They made an Internet Explorer toolbar for kids to keep your kids safe on the internet. One of the other jobs was for a Mac magazine. And the third job was to work on the website at ZDTV.
Okay.
And the reason I got the ZDTV gig, I think, or at least that's the hiring manager, Regina Preciado, later told me, was because I was already doing everything they needed me to do on my own for Subbrilliant News, for my own little publication. And so it was just a matter of, taking somebody who's enthusiastic about technology and already knows how to do this sort of thing and plugging them into their system. I wanted that job more than any of them because it was technology, it was radio, it was television, it was writing, all the things I love to do in one. And so I was lucky enough to get it. And I worked my way up there. I started on the websites for the Screensavers and Call for Help, Leo Laporte's shows. And then eventually, as the dotcom boom fizzled and they started laying people off, I would gather things that were left over until eventually I kind of floated up to be the executive producer of the website. And when it was Tech TV and techtv.com, we actually had a really good thing going. In fact, at the point that Paul Allen decided to sell Tech TV in 2004, the international part of Tech TV was making money. The website was break even, and it was only the television part that was losing money, and it wasn't losing that much. So it was really heartbreaking at that point to have the network sold. And he not only sold it, he sold it to Comcast, who decided they really just wanted it for parts, and they merged it into an existing network that they had called G4. So I went from there, had a few people that I had known at Tech TV who had moved to Cnet, and I got an interview at Cnet, and they hired me. Candy Myers hired me over there in this weird job that I still don't quite understand. They needed somebody to edit their homepage, which is an important job in any of these journalistic websites.
Sure.
But they wanted to do more than that. They wanted more than just a homepage editor. They also wanted someone to guide their special coverage. So like they do holiday gift guides and things like that. They wanted someone to develop their help and how-to content, which because I'd worked on the Screensavers and Call for Help through my whole run at Tech TV, I felt like I could contribute there pretty well. And then just some other various weird things, like we did a Cnet on tour thing where me and Molly Wood, who was on my team, went and toured around the country and met people, asked them to sell gadgets, talked to them. It was just this crazy combination of stuff. I think what Candy Myers was doing was saying, let's just get talented people, put them together and see what happens. Because it was me, Molly Wood, a guy named Tim Moynihan, and Susie Brannon on that team running the Cnet front door. So I think we did an amazing job with the front door. We increased click-through on there quite a bit. We had launched all of these special help and how-to things like Insider Secrets and Weekend Project. And part of the new things at Cnet were video. They wanted to do more video, and they were launching something called Cnet TV at the time. They had only been doing product reviews as video, and they wanted to branch out. So Molly Wood became the first one to do a show that was kind of Mark Larkin, the guy who headed Cnet TV, and I had brainstormed what kind of shows could be. And I was like, you should take Molly and just have her say the things she writes because she's hilarious. So that's how they started a show called Buzz Report. And then the reason I'm saying all of that, because it doesn't have much to do with me, I was the one pushing for podcasting because Adam Curry was out there doing the Daily Source Code. Podcasting was starting to take off. I was like, we should do a Cnet podcast. And we were all sitting around the table in a conference where we're talking about how to launch a podcast. And Molly and I were just riffing off each other. And Mark Larkin said, well, that should be the podcast. Let's call it Buzz Out Loud. So it's like Buzz Report video, except on audio. And that's how I started my first podcast at Cnet that lasted for over 1,000 episodes. Molly and I doing daily tech news. And that's how I got into doing daily tech news. Buzz Out Loud started once a week. Then it went twice a week, then 3 times a week, then eventually every day. And at first it was 10 minutes, and then it went 20 minutes, then it went 30 minutes.
Right.
And it just kind of naturally grew into the template for daily tech news. So I worked at Cnet doing a lot of other videos at Cnet for a long time. But I was also I was really enamored with podcasting, and I was starting a bunch of podcasts independently. And at a certain point, I actually had people saying, hey, we'd like to advertise on one of your podcasts that you do. And I had to go, at this point, CBS had bought Cnet, and I had to go through CBS's conflict of interest policy every time I wanted to take an advertiser on one of these shows, which was cumbersome and totally understandable for them. And it was actually a very good process. They weren't combative, and they didn't want me to not do it. They just didn't want it to compete with them, which made sense. But at a certain point, I realized, you know what, this is too hard. What I should be is a freelancer. And so what I tried to do was be able to continue to do things for Cnet and do some other things. And it was at that point that Leo Laporte came and said, hey, would you like to do some shows for me? So I started doing one show for him before I left Cnet. It had to be non-competitive, so it didn't really work because I was limited in what I could do on it. But eventually he made me an offer to say, hey, why don't you do a daily tech news show for me? And I won't, you can do whatever other shows you want. All rising tide floats all boats. So that's what I did. I left Cnet in April of 2010, started Tech News Today in June of 2010 at TWiT. And I was there for 3 years until this past December when Leo decided that he really needed somebody to be in-house. And I skipped over part of the story. My wife got a job in November of 2012 working for YouTube in Los Angeles. So I had to move. And we did a year of my show remotely from Los Angeles, but he really wanted somebody who was based in Petaluma. So I left TWiT at the end of December, and I've been off on my own since then, trying to see if I can make a go of it.
Just a side note here. Did I read correctly? Your father was a food scientist.
That is correct. Yes,
and he has worked on the Coffee Mate project.
Yeah, he worked at Pet Milk. Pretty much, from the early 60s till he retired. And he was a specialist in evaporated milk, but he did a lot of dairy science projects. And yeah, he worked on Coffee Mate. He worked on the Seago diet drink. And he Spoon Up. I don't know if anybody remembers that. He worked on a lot of old El Paso stuff.
Oh, gotcha. Well, a small world. It's very, very interesting backstory on that. Do you have a favorite success quote?
I don't. I like a lot of them. Winston Churchill is one of the ones that I love the most. And I don't know if this is my favorite, but it's the one that popped to mind when you asked me this. Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts.
Well, let me ask you this. How do you employ that today?
I employ that by not rushing. I don't look at any success and say, okay, time, we're good now. I don't have to keep moving or keep pushing. And I don't look at any setback or any slow, uptake as fatal. I follow those very little. It's just, always continue to focus on what it is that makes what you do enjoyable. And continue to refine that. So if you get success, that's great. Enjoy it, but don't rest on it. And if things aren't going your way, just continue to make whatever you're making good. And that, to me, is what gives you that courage to continue. The fact that you're doing something you love anyway. And it doesn't seem like it sometimes, but as long as you are making something that you think is really good, there will be other people who think it's really good too.
Let me ask you this. You've done a lot of different things. You wrote science fiction novels. I think Boiling Point was the one that you wrote.
Yeah.
So you're an author. You're an author, a great writer. You've done all these things. You were a news anchor at one time. Why technology? What was, the thing about that you loved more than maybe, mainstream news or things of that nature? I
was a news anchor in college at the cable station. And that was really fun. I really enjoyed that. It was during the Clinton election in 92. And we covered that. That was a good time. And I also did some news and radio, and we covered the Gulf War. That was exciting to cover. But I've always been into technology. I got a TI-99 4A as a reward for saving up money. I've told this story in other venues, but my dad, the food scientist, took me in, I think it was a Kmart, to buy an Atari 2600 game console, because that's what all my friends had. And I had saved up $99 to buy that thing. And we got to the shelf, and it's sitting in front of me, and I'm about to get it. I'm on top of the world. And he says, well, look at that. There's a TI computer there for $199. Now, that will do a lot more than that Atari 2600. If you want that computer, I will pay the difference between the prices. Or you can go ahead and take your, the money you saved and buy the Atari 2600, your choice. And it was the smartest thing he ever did, because if he had said you should get the computer, I would have resisted. No, all my friends wanted an Atari 2600, right?
Those were a very sexy computer. I had one myself, and the little cartridge that plugged into the slot.
And that was the thing that swayed me was, well, I can play games on that one too and do all this other stuff. So I took the matching funds and I got the TI. And I used to program on it, and eventually I upgraded to a Commodore 64.
Sure.
But I've always loved playing around with technology and seeing what can be done that couldn't be done before.
Well, you're very influential, Tom, in the world of, I like to use the term web TV, new media, however you want to put it. I mean, you really are an early pioneer of this stuff. You date to 86 or so in this field.
Well, 86 is when I started in radio.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if I can claim new media roots going back then, but I've been doing stuff on the web since early 90s.
Okay, so from the early 90s. Okay, from the mid 90s. What pushback did you get from the mainstream media on this? I mean, did they say this isn't going to go anywhere? You're wasting your talent. Come here. How was that perceived?
It's funny because I don't consider myself influential, and maybe I should. Maybe that's false modesty, but I feel like the guy who's always been on the outside trying to get in. Right? What pushback I feel like I got was, well, you got to pay your dues, kid. Not everybody succeeds in this business, and you got to know somebody and this and that. And what the internet did was allowed me to break in on my own terms. So I got the break by getting the job at Tech TV, but Tech TV was an outsider network. It was an independent. It was owned by Ziff Davis and then by Paul Allen. It was not owned by a big cable company. And so, if I've ever gotten resistance to new media, it's been from within new media itself. For instance, at Cnet, Buzz Out Loud was originally just a lunchtime project. And I think at some point, every boss I worked for asked me if maybe we shouldn't stop doing it. For the first boss was my editor in chief, who I was complaining. Well, I was complaining. I was like, look, we've got too much on our plates here. And he's like, well, maybe you need to stop doing that lunchtime podcast. And this is before Buzz Out Loud had really taken off. And I was like, that's the one thing I'm enjoying doing. I don't want to give that up. And then, throughout its term, Buzz Out Loud was hard to sell, right? The sales staff at Cnet very rightly was focused on selling reviews because that's where the money is. That's Cnet's bread and butter. And how to take this weird audio podcast, it's new. For a while, it worked because podcasting became a buzzword, right? In 2006, 2007, suddenly they were like, yeah, we can sell this because podcast. All you got to say at a meeting is podcast, throw in podcast, and everybody wants podcast. But then, of course, buzzwords go away. And when that buzzword went away, they're like, wow, we can't sell that anymore. So resistance within new media, I have definitely encountered.
But no pushback. I mean, when you take Tech TV, for example, the other networks, the ABC, CBS, NBC, all these guys, no pushback from them. I mean, they didn't think, oh, gosh, this just isn't going to work.
Nobody thought Tech TV was going to work. And it didn't.
But
not for the reasons. Yeah, not for the reasons they thought. I mean, Tech TV didn't work because it didn't have the leverage that you needed in that business at the time. And that business is starting to change quite a bit. But at the time, you really needed to have a big parent company to get a small channel carried. We got to, I think it was 40 or 50 million homes of the 90 million homes at the time. And we just couldn't get any farther. Without having, an ABC Disney or a Comcast or somebody owning us who could say, hey, if you don't carry Tech TV, then, we're gonna charge you more for ESPN. That's how those smaller networks usually get launched. So that was what killed Tech TV. What is funny, though, is inside Tech TV, I was on the web, and that was always looked down upon because that was just this ancillary model. In fact, Paul Allen internally famously once said the web was the fax machine of the 90s. There's just old technology, and it was going to go away. I think I know what he meant, which was the web as it was then was going to change, and it definitely did. We got Web 2.0, and then we got apps and all of this stuff. But what we were doing on the web, I think, was the most valuable thing that we did. And the folks who got it had shows that did a lot better than the folks who ignored it.
Do you have, or did you have at that time, a mentor that you looked to for advice and to help you along your career?
During the Tech TV days?
Yeah, in those earlier days, and maybe even today, is there a mentor that you look up to, get advice from, that and counsel that's helped you with your career?
Lots, dozens of people. I've never had that one guru type that I always go to. I've mostly relied on the support of friends. I definitely had some good bosses. Regina Preciado, the woman who hired me at ZDTV, was somebody that I relied on a lot, even after she left. Because what happened, she hired me as an associate producer, and then 3 months later she left, and I got her job. And so I was relying on her quite a bit to say, well, wait a minute, how do you do this? How do you do that? So I owe her a ton of thanks, but I think of her as much as a friend, which I guess is true of all mentors. And then Peter Hammersley, who was my boss later on, he was the executive producer of Tech TV, was very helpful and gave me chances to do TV stuff that I never would have done, like produced a couple shows, like a holiday special. Greg Brannon, who has passed away this past year, was an amazing mentor for the time that I worked with him, and another person that I kept in touch with over the years. So yeah, there's a couple there from Tech TV particularly that I relied on. And even at Cnet, peers like Molly Wood, we're still great friends. We still bounce ideas off each other and talk to folks. Veronica Belmont and I have gone on to start our own company, which is a science fiction and fantasy book club that we do podcasts and meetups and things with. Brian Cooley at Cnet as well, somebody that I definitely still use as a sounding board when I can get a chance to talk with him, and talked with him a lot then.
Let's go back to the founding of Sword and Laser. What was that aha moment that said, okay, I really wanted to start my own company?
We sort of backed into it, right? It's funny because just the Sword and Laser book club started because Veronica wanted to do a science fiction and fantasy book club on the web. And it started not as a podcast. It started just as a website. And then we knew we would eventually do a podcast, which we did shortly. And then the podcast was just sort of, one of those sideline things, one of those sideline projects we did for a long time. And it was fun. And then at a certain point, I can't remember which came first. I think it was because we were in negotiations. So I think that came first. We were in negotiations with Geek and Sundry to do a season of video for their YouTube channel, which we did. And it was great fun. To do that, the best way of arranging things was to form an LLC. Sure. So Veronica went to her husband, who's an entrepreneur, and said, we need to form an LLC. And he's like, well, okay, this is how I do it. So we did it how he did it, which meant we did a lot more than we needed to set it up. But once we did that, we started looking at it and going, well, wait a minute, we have a company now. Now, a lot of people start LLCs just for tax reasons or this or that, and they're not really companies in the strictest sense. But we both kind of got enamored with that idea of, well, what if we did treat this like a business? And that was a conversation that I think dragged out over a year. But I think it was in this past year, after we were no longer doing the Geek and Sundry thing, and we did a Kickstarter to fund season 2 of our video show, and we were doing an anthology, that we realized, well, you know what? We could make this into our company, and we've sort of dedicated ourselves to that ever since. Along
your journey, if it will, Tom, what do you consider to be the biggest business mistake you've made?
Which one to pick from?
I'm so glad you said that.
Yeah.
I don't feel so bad for myself now, right?
Yeah, there are definitely plenty. The one mistake, actually, I just mentioned one of them, which was starting the LLC as a Delaware corporation, which is something you totally want to do if you intend to build up a business to sell off later. But It causes complications if you're both in California and you just want to have a small business, essentially, which is what we've got going on now. Not getting the right accountant, man, that's incredibly important. Trying to do it myself, first of all, huge mistake. I think I've avoided any major disasters, but definitely get experts to help you out from the beginning. Especially for tax things. I think everybody figures that part out. But even for the other stuff, we've gotten some bad advice as far as like whether to do payroll or not do payroll in a company that's 2 people large. I wish I had done a lot more research on that business end of things early on. And I feel it's only by the grace of God that I avoided doing something really stupid.
So the biggest lesson from that now is when you're contemplating a business decision, you now consult with an expert in that area.
Yeah. And it's still hard to find good ones. Is finding somebody that understands what you're doing and that you can trust. But yeah, definitely.
You've met a lot of technology leaders in your lifetime. So I got to ask you, Tom, which one strikes you as the most memorable and why?
I haven't met that many big technology leaders. I think Steve Ballmer almost stepped on my foot once, and Robert Scoble did step on my foot once, as a matter of fact. But it's actually the more innovative people that stick in my mind, and that I feel like I want to get to know. Somebody like a Jonathan Colton. I'm a great admirer of. If you don't know Jonathan, he is a musician and a former coder. And he decided that he would leave his job programming because he was miserable and try to make a go of it as an independent musician. So his first shtick was to do a song a week for 52 weeks and put it out as a podcast. And he did that. And some of them are memorable songs. Code Monkey that came out of that was used as a show theme on a G4 TV show. And he even had his cover of Baby's Got Back ripped off note for note. Even though it was a cover, they used his style of that song on Glee last year. So he had some great stuff come out of that. He had some not so great stuff come out of that as well. But it launched him into this solo career where he was able to just say, hey, if enough people want me to come to a city, I'll come to that city and do a concert, and started doing a concert tour. And then eventually he was opening for They Might Be Giants on tour and putting out traditional albums and hitting the Billboard charts. So I look at that as the kind of thing that the internet makes possible, and I'm a big admirer of. And I've met Biz Stone in the early days before Twitter, and definitely a smart guy. And I've met Brewster Kale. I got to interview him at Cnet. He runs archive.org, and I'm a huge admirer of what they do and the project that they're after, which is to preserve the history of the internet, which I think is incredibly visionary because everyone thinks it's silly. But the longer we go, the less silly it seems, because you always think it's silly when it's not history yet. But he had the vision to say, we should start capturing this stuff now, because eventually we'll want to look back on it and it'll become useful.
Let's take a deeper dive into what you're doing today. Let's talk about the shows you're producing, Sword and Laser. Let's talk about your programs, Current Geek, Cord Killers. Let's talk about the business model you're setting up today. So can you give us some more info on what you're doing every day and how you're growing your business?
Sure. I'm trying lots of different things. And since I was sort of unexpectedly on my own, I took that as an opportunity to say, okay, well, I've got lots of different ways I could go. Let me try as many as I can. So with Sword and Laser, we did Kickstarter to do our season 2 video. We've partnered up with Boing Boing for our audio podcast, and we're doing traditional advertising model there. And we're doing some merchandise support. So we're going to put out an anthology here in a month or two that was written by our audience. And we'll see. We're going to keep all of those things going and see how it looks. It's the most vibrant of the shows I've got because it's the one I've been doing the longest, and it didn't have to change. We were already underway with it. Current Geek is a partnership with Scott Johnson of the Frog Pants Network. And what we did, instead of doing a Kickstarter to get it going, he had the idea, he and David Michael over there had the idea of doing backer packs. So instead of doing a Kickstarter that's 30 days long and has to meet a goal, they just said, let's just sell the rewards direct. You want to support the show? We've got signed posters, we've got calendars, we've got, merchandise, and help us out. And we made a good nest egg to get us off the ground while Scott's network starts selling ads. And that's going to become a more traditional model there, but we're still going to do merchandise support for that show as well. Cord Killers with Brian Brushwood we decided to experiment with Patreon, which is a new service that allows people to back artists based on their works. So with musicians, it's I'll back this artist at so many dollars per song or so many dollars per album. And when they put it out, then I'll get charged. So with Cord Killers, that's what we're doing. You back us per episode, whatever you think you can do. And then every time we put an episode out, then you get charged that. And it's got a little bit of the Kickstarter model with rewards and things like that. But we're also looking at licensing that show. So we would keep it largely ad-free. We've got a partnership that we're doing with Doghouse Systems, but it's not a traditional ad. It's more of they want some intelligence from our audience, and we're facilitating that, so to speak, by saying, hey, audience, what would you want to see in a set-top box? Doghouse wants to build it. And then the licensing model would be to have a network pick us up and replay us on their channel, helps build their channel, and we get a small fee out of that. And then the other show that is probably my most important show, it's my biggest audience, it's the one I want to get right, is still in its testing phase. Daily Tech News show. I do daily tech news, as I've been doing for over 2,000 episodes. And right now, I'm just saying Patreon. Monthly backing, go say, a nickel a show. I have 20 shows a month on average. If you give me $1 a month, if every single person in the audience did that because they value the show, then I won't have to take ads. I won't have to do anything else that I don't want to. And it's been funny. The response of people like, I'm going to back your show, but please do take ads because I want you to succeed. And I was really confused by that at first. I'm like, but don't you want it to be ad free? Everybody hates ads, right? But they're like, no, as long as the ads are relevant to us and you're choosing only advertisers that you trust, we're good with that. So I may do that, but I'm going to see how far I can get just on the listener supported model, because Adam Curry does that with No Agenda Show. He calls it the value for value model, and it works really well for him. So I'm trying all these different variations to see which one sticks.
I know you're really well established and have a lot of podcasts underneath your belt. Do you have any advice for new podcasters that you might want to share to help them maybe grow their audience and get better and becoming better podcasters? Is there any advice you can share on that?
Sure. I mean, it's the same way you get to Carnegie Hall, practice. To beginning podcasters, I always say, don't wait. Don't record alone in your room without putting it out there. Just start doing it. Start putting it up, even if you're not any good at all. Even if you listen to it and you cringe, you're only going to get better when you make it real. And you can do that at no cost on the internet. Everything is free for a while anyway. So take advantage of that and just do it. And then if you don't have an audience at first, find one. At least, even if it's just friends that you convince to listen and give you feedback. And then once you start to maybe gather a few people, if you're doing content you care about, you'll start to find other people who care about that as well and share your view on things, and really engage with that audience. That's what we did at Buzz Out Loud. Now, granted, we were at Cnet, so we had a little bit of a built-in audience, but it was not nearly as big as you might think. Cnet audience in 2004, 2005 was very passive. They were not willing to engage and try new things. They were there to, look at a product review and then go buy something. So our audience was very small at the beginning, but we cultivated them and we made them part of the show. And once you do that, they'll start to tell other people for you, even if it's really small. And then try to bring on guests. See if you can get folks that you admire to come on your show, because then their audience will sample it and say, oh, what's up with that? And likewise, put yourself out there and don't invite yourself rudely onto other people's show, but, make yourself available. See if you can partner up with other people who are like-minded and have similar ideals. I mean, it's really an idea of co-opetition in podcasting where there's room for everybody to do something cool. So if somebody's doing something similar, don't look at that as somebody you have to crush. Look at it as somebody you can partner up with.
So what's your long-term strategy for your business now? Are you going to develop it into more of a network of shows, more podcasts? What are you looking at for the long term?
My long-term goal is sustainability and simplicity. My focus, the thing that gets me up in the morning and makes me want to do stuff is content. And it always has been. Otherwise, there were some opportunities at Cnet to become more of an executive this type of position. And it was a hard decision. I had to do some soul searching, but I said, no, you know what? I want to do content. And that's my goal here, is to be able to do the content I want on my terms as well as I can. So everything else flows from that for me. That's why I'm doing Daily Tech News Show as an audio podcast that is me focusing on delivering what I think is the important things to know each day in context, with a little bit of discussion and added analysis, because that's what's important, is what, at least in my business, is what you're saying, what you're providing, and what that information is. And then everything else should make that better. And so I'm hoping that I don't need to start a network, that I don't need to build bigger, that I can just build better.
Do you have a mastermind group that you belong to at this time?
A mastermind group?
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't thought about it that way. I suppose I do.
Well, it's, because I've talked to some other leaders in podcasting, and the consensus is a lot of them belong to some type of mastermind group where they talk to and share with other, podcasters and content creators, different business ideas, strategies, and that sort of thing. And I was just curious as to whether you belong to one as well.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of it, but yes, I do. I mean, all my co-hosts, Brian Brushwood, Veronica Belmont, Justin Robert Young, Scott Johnson, especially Scott with Frog Pants, are all part of what I didn't realize until you just put it that way, or my mastermind group, and lots of other podcasters, Brian Ibbett, Nicole Spagnuolo. It's more of just a loose association of people who really enjoy doing this, who are always out there sharing ideas and talking with each other. But yeah, I do.
All right. This is the part of the show I call the bonus round. So there's just some quick questions for you, and let's get right to them. The first one is, what is a personal habit that you have each day to help ensure your success?
I reserve time for things that I think you're tempted not to reserve time for. So from, used to be when I would do Tech News Today at 10 a.m., from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m., no meetings, no calls. I would occasionally violate that for something 10 or 15 minutes, but people would say, oh, come on, can you do a quick call? Can you do a quick meet? No, I focus on doing that show. I make sure that I prepare for everything, because I want to make sure that I do the best show that I can every day.
What is your favorite business book that you would refer to a friend?
Clue Train Manifesto, no doubt, still one of the most influential books, because it didn't so much tell me new things, but confirm things I suspected were also things that other people who had been doing this for longer valued. And that's that, your audience is your boss. Doesn't matter what line of business you're in. Your customer is your boss.
What tech can you not live without?
This sounds prosaic in this age of smartphones and tablets, but it's my laptop. My laptop is my katana. It's my weapon. It's what when I go into battle, what I use. And having a good laptop, I name all my laptops because they're my pal. They're the one that let me do everything.
What's the next big thing for Tom Merritt?
Well, the next big thing for me would be Daily Tech News Show, getting enough Patreon subscribers that I feel comfortable that its fate is assured, and it's actually getting pretty close. But and after that, South by Southwest in Austin, I'm planning to attend. Brian Brushwood and Justin Robert Young and I have got some plans to collaborate and maybe launch a few things there. So I'm looking forward to that.
You're an entrepreneur as well, Tom.
Am I?
Yeah, afraid you are.
I used to grab Entrepreneur magazine at the library in Greenville Public Library when I was growing up. And I don't feel like any of the people that were in that magazine. But then that was 1984, 85. So
I know that magazine, and you're right, because they're all wearing the $1,000 suits, and you're going, wow. If you could only give an aspiring entrepreneur one piece of advice, what would that advice be?
Don't abandon your passion for short-term gain. Whatever you're doing, you better be passionate about it. And it doesn't matter if it's sales, or if it's selling fruit, or if it's doing podcasts. If you're not loving what you're doing, you're not going to be as successful at it as you would be at doing what you love doing. And focus on that, and make sure you know that you're not compromising that Not that you can't compromise. Compromise is good, but don't compromise that passion. Don't give up on it.
All right, Tom, I always like to give our guests the last word in an interview. Is there anything you'd like to say to the audience before we end the interview?
Thank you. Anybody who's interested in anything I have to say, I always find a little stunning still. And so I'm really gratified that people get some value out of the things I do. So thank you very much.
Tom, thank you for being a guest on the show today.
Thanks, Bruce.
That was Tom Merritt, and he was a great guest. Enjoyed having him on there, and I wish him very well in his new endeavor. And I hope that people go and check out his website, check out what he's doing. And I think on that note, we're going to wrap up this week's installment of Business Computing Weekly. Remember, if it's in your shop not making you money or saving you money, get it out there. This is Bruce Naylor. Have a great, productive week ahead.